All right, welcome back. This is the Something Ventured podcast. This is part 2 of my conversation with Neil Cohen. By the way, I'm Kent Lindstrom. Thanks for listening to the Something Ventured podcast. Neil Cohen back talking about getting a job, managing a career in Silicon Valley. I'm going to tell you the secret right now. The wealthy people on the hill, what their strategy is. It's fairly simple. What people are doing who are the wealthiest in Silicon Valley, you know, what most people do, Silicon Valley is really designed as a founder-centric, almost a Ponzi scheme, if you will. People work way harder than they probably should, get paid way less than they should. When they travel, it's crappy, kind of coach class travel. And every 5 to 6 years, after 2 or 3 companies don't work out, because that's what happens with 99% of the companies, they get a $200,000 hit on their options because something gets bought. That's fantastic. That's also what your bonus would be if you worked at McKinsey every year. So the first wealth maximizing strategy is go work for McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, get paid a ton of money, and invest in startups with your cash, not with your time. Sad but true. If somebody invests in 30 companies and they get one hit, they feel really lucky. And yet a lot of people are doing this with their career. They're taking whole 3-year chunks of their life instead of investing $10,000 or $20,000 as people do. The wealth maximizing strategy that works is don't try to be the head guy. Don't try to be the CMO or the CFO or whatever. Take the best job you can get, no matter how low level that job is, at a pre-IPO company that's known to be a hit. Whether that's Uber, whether that's Dropbox, whether that's Facebook, get the crappiest job you can get. And so the guys that you see who are doing really well in Silicon Valley are doing things like, they're the assistant general counsel. And the trick is when you're the assistant general counsel or you're the junior BD guy, you can move from company to company. Like, no offense, but you're not that important. If you're the CEO of a company, you can't just leave. You can't leave your employees and your investors and your customers by the wayside to move on. But if you're the assistant general counsel at Google, you can go be the assistant general counsel at Facebook. And if you're the assistant general counsel at Facebook, you can go take that job over to Twitter. And you meet people whose titles are just, they were in the trenches. But the companies they worked at were Twitter, Facebook, Google, when they were known to be hits. And a lot of times come 40, 45 years old, these guys are not showing up to work every day. Let's put it that way. Anyway, thanks for listening to Something Ventured. Really appreciate it. Neil Cohen is back. This is part 2 of my conversation with Neil. This is the Something Ventured podcast. At a higher level, that process where you interview with 10 people.
Yeah.
Everyone, it sounds like a really good process, right? Like, and there's a couple issues there. One, people who work at big companies, no offense, actually, be offended, whatever. They have a worldview, right? When you're at a famous company, Facebook, or your worldview is that you're smarter than everybody else. That's why you're there.
Right.
And unless you're Larry or Sergey and you founded it, or you're Sheryl Sandberg and you really had something to do with building it, you're just a lucky traveler. Like, enjoy your money, enjoy your time, but you actually didn't build anything. But your worldview is that you're really smart and you're sitting with other people's worldviews that they're really smart. You went to Stanford, and so someone who didn't go to Stanford couldn't possibly be, And so the people who get through that process are literally just people who are good at getting through that process.
Yep.
I talked to someone recently, and they had like a code interview where they had to write on the board, like, oh, here's a problem, like, figure it out on the board. And I was talking to another engineer, and he was like, what's funny about that is actually engineering is not something where you need to be quick on your feet in a room to figure out a problem. It's actually something where you can go away and be thoughtful and think about it. Mm-hmm. So the people who are good at that are people who just develop the skill of being good on a whiteboard in a room with coding. It doesn't mean they're a better engineer. It doesn't mean they're harder working. It just means they're good at that process, which for business development makes sense, right? Like, yeah, you need to be good in a room, quick on your feet, all that. But for being an engineer, actually being quick on the whiteboard, or, being able to figure out some algorithm from freaking college. I've been the CFO of a company. I have a CFA. I have an MBA in finance. If you gave me like an old accounting T account test from my undergrad days, I couldn't do it.
But this gets back to the challenge that you initially alluded to, which is when you have these all-day interviews, and the challenge is, and it depends on the position, but I would think for the most part it might work across the board for every category. Not everybody's in agreement as what is needed for that job.
Yeah.
Not everybody is a good interviewer.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the same goal in the interview process because it's not well coordinated internally. And so you're kind of going through this process talking to 10 people, and they come back at the end of the day and 3 people say perfect, and 3 people say, God, we're not so sure, and 3 people say we're not what you're looking for.
Right.
And the reason is because there hasn't been this kind of universal approach.
Yeah.
And like I said, the question, you still get the ridiculous greatest strength, greatest weakness.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of in your career kind of questions, which have nothing to do with the problems at hand.
Yeah.
Are you going to be a good coworker or team player? How would and I don't think there's any problem in saying to people, we're dealing with this problem right now. How might, what are some thoughts about solving it versus like specific code? But like, what approach would you take? What's your perspective?
Yeah.
Have you solved a similar problem like this in the past?
Yeah.
And show me that you have some aptitude for thinking and processing information. But the questions never surround that.
Yeah.
And, it's like, tell me about yourself and your career. What does that have to do with this job? And it's really, and again, when I talk to my students, I said, look, you got to be prepared for those. You've got to be prepared for those questions. And better yet, the best interview for you is when you go in, don't let them ask them. Like you have to put the interviewer on, you have to start the interviewer answering the question so it goes in the direction you want. So if we're doing that, I would come in and say, hey, great to meet you. Gosh, how come you joined this company? What do you like about working here? Yeah. What's the biggest problem you're working on today?
Yeah.
And I can start the interview process and then get it into issues about the company, and we can talk about that, which I think is going to give you a much better sense of who I am and what I'm about than, let's say, whether or not I care too much. Yeah. Right?
Well, I think it's not that hard to have a conversation with somebody and figure out what they're about. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you don't need to get in the interview and suddenly you're like some weird, like, what's your favorite animal and what, like, fuck you. Like, look, when you're dating, you're trying to figure out if someone's appropriate for you.
Right.
You wouldn't get past like the coffee if you were like, so I've got, several questions, in prior relationships, tell me a time you had a problem and how did you work your way through it? You'd be like, oh, geez, is it 7:02 already? Like, catch you later.
We actually have a mutual friend who just had a match date like that.
Yeah. Probably not a second one.
Yeah, no. The second one didn't happen, but it was pretty funny to hear the details of how the checklist went through.
Yeah. Google got in trouble. I don't know, but they were asking people like who their favorite superhero was, which is just idiotic. Right. But it was especially idiotic because they figured out that women couldn't answer the question because they didn't fuck around reading comic books when they were young, and so they were like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, what? That's just ridiculous. Yeah. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's, and I think, again, when you get back to this, if there are people out there listening and they want to take away something constructive, which is in that interview process, when you're bringing in candidates, you should really get everybody on the same page of exactly what you're looking for. And no freelancing allowed. It's not like, Cindy could be looking for somebody to do X and Joe is looking for somebody to do Y. It's like everybody has to be on the same page and know what you're looking for and interviewing for, as opposed to having these disparate opinions based on the department you're in and your perspective on the business.
Yeah.
And, in working with some really good recruiters recently, they say that that's the biggest problem they have, which is getting the founders or the executive management team on the same page for a specific job, especially when you start getting into the director VP level, where it's, the skill set might be needed to be a little broader.
Well, my sense, and what the hell do I know, but the way to do that is like 2 or 3 people should make the decision.
Yeah.
Like the CEO and the CFO should be like, we are hiring X.
Mm-hmm.
We've decided to hire this guy. The 5 of you all are also interviewing him to see if there's anything we're missing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not asking for everybody's opinion on everything. And when you're hiring your sales executive, we're not going to give you, we're going to be, it's the, you know what the RACI diagram is, where there's people who are responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
Right.
It's like in this process, you are going to be consulted. What
Mm-hmm.
that means is you're going to interview the person, you will tell me something, but if you tell me something, I will consider what you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean if you don't like the person, we're not going to hire them.
Yeah.
And if you're informed, it means we are letting you know we're hiring this person. So if you happen to have heard that he's an axe murderer and you've got the court records, that's something, but we're not looking for your opinion on it.
Probably material,
like,
yeah.
You know, like
Right.
It doesn't take 10 people to make a decision about
Yeah,
hiring
but a lot of
someone.
companies, they're into this kind of consensus building because it's a team and everybody's got to, and everybody's opinion
Which in the
is
history
equal.
of history, like
Right.
on any other decision, no one ever says the best way to do this is to get 10 people together
Right.
to figure it out.
Right.
It's always like, well, you go execute. Eisenhower, you go figure out how to take that beach. Like, not you all, 10 all figure out how to take that beach.
Well, and to that point, if it's the CFO, CEO, or whoever it is at that level, you have to hire people that are going to make you look better.
Yeah.
And if you're waiting for consensus, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. Well, or you'll hire the worst person. I mean, we
everybody's fifth choice.
Yeah,
right, because he's the only one everybody can agree on.
Yeah, like I've worked with our CEO, and a lot of times we're like, everyone's like, nah, 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 nah. And we're like, and then we'll be like, that guy. And they're like, that guy? Like, that guy didn't go here, he didn't do this. We're like, nope, that's the guy. He's just the guy. He's got the right energy, he's got the right attitude. Like, we'll do it. And we're almost always right. Like, almost always we're like, yep, that was it. Now, that means, like, there's 10 people we reject where everyone's like, why? Like, they're perfect. They're perfect. And then a year later, everyone's like, yeah, it just worked. And I think there's something about 2 people, 3 people, a small group of, like more than one, like not just the CEO, but a couple people saying, that's the guy. Does anyone else have a problem with this? Mm-hmm. I think works a lot better than like, oh, we had 10 people do it, and this is the least objectionable guy to these 10 people.
Right.
Right? Like, oh, okay. Like, it might work. It might not. Who knows? We had this at, Friendster I worked at. It became a very hot company for a period of time. And we hired a bunch of executives that, obviously didn't get the job done. And what I think part of what happened is we hired the executives who were just good at getting a job at a hot company. And an executive who's good at getting a job at a hot company that is driven by a board is an executive who's good at managing upward to a board and looking good to a board. It's not somebody who's necessarily good at leading people in the trenches, motivating people, exciting people in the trenches.
Yeah.
So when people become really successful, talk about cronyism, like, oh, they hire their buddy.
Right.
Well, the reason they hire their buddy is generally because they've seen that person perform in a situation before all these other optics came into effect. So you're like, Kent, I know what you do. I know you're not going to jump to the next company when the next company gets hot. I'm hiring you. And you can put a spin on that. Oh, you're just hiring your buddies, your cronies. Like, yes, I'm hiring people I trust and have worked with before for a very specific reason, which is a whole bunch of, like, I know what their problems are. I know what their attributes are. Like, the new person who came in and just persuaded me to come in, all I know actually is that he's good at that.
And something, I get that. I agree with that philosophy. Again, at the end of the day, if you're working at a company, you're accountable for your area of expertise and moving the company forward. And you want to work with people that you can trust and believe in.
Yeah.
And and if you've got a proven track record in working with somebody, you already know what that person's capable of. So as a matter of fact, again, coming back to my immediate experience, I was in the hunt at one company, loved the company, what they were doing. They liked me back. They ended up stopping the search, and he hired somebody he worked with.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I get that.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah.
That he was able to get this guy that he trusts to come over.
Yeah.
And you can walk away from that kind of a thing saying it now you have to, I'm internalizing it. Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I would have probably done the same exact thing if I was in that position.
Yeah.
Because especially at a startup where where we've already talked about early on, where the margins are for success are slim to none.
Yeah.
You don't have time to build that trust and expectation and those types of things, which is really critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And at our company, there's a couple of things that like we kind of like we like people who are really passionate about what we're doing, which isn't always true. Like there's companies where it works perfectly fine. Like, look, I need this built. I don't care if I've worked with people who are great, who are like, I don't really care about what this company is doing, but I know that if I do this, it will be successful, be sold, and I'll be wealthy. And that's fine. But we like people who are passionate about what we're doing, and we're at the same time, no drama. Like we're just not. Eric Ries once said to me, the guy who wrote the Lean Startup. He had like, I was involved in a company and something. He was like, I have a no drama policy. I was like, I like that. Like no, like it's a business. Like we're not getting emotional. We're not jumping up and, passionate about the thing, sure, but like being emotional and blah blah blah, blah politics and like Game of Thrones is on Sunday night, coming soon. It's great. Like watch it, enjoy it, but get back to like have some like in a startup. There's enough stuff to do,
right?
Like if you're looking for somebody else's job, like you have too many people in your company. Like if you have enough to do in a startup, big company, I get it. It's politics. It's up and down the ladder. It's if you're the VP, you'll make $10 million, and if you're the not VP, you'll make $4 million, and that matters. And it is Game of Thrones. But in a smaller company, I think you do have the luxury of saying, hey, no drama policy.
Well, and what I've always found to be interesting is at that startup level and working at a number of them and working with as many as I've worked, it's like, if you've got time for drama, what are you doing with your day? Because it's pretty fast and furious with just the stuff that's on your plate.
I know how it happens. I think I watch this. It's so you get these groups of people who. Like you go to lunch, right? And so like you got this group of like 7 people and then 2 of them go to lunch. And if a bug takes hold, and the 2 people start going hand, what that guy, all of a sudden now you've got your little like we're entertaining ourselves at lunch. Yeah. So my advice is when you go to lunch, talk about the Giants. Hope Pence gets better soon. Like whatever. Like just don't, but that's how that's what happens is people go out in little subgroups and they start talking to each other, and then they're suddenly playing Game of Thrones in their tiny little way, and then you're done. Then your company's then it's that's my thing. Like some people thrive on it. Like you're fired. Oh, the next day you're back. Like throw Steve Jobs with the throwing I guess he never threw anything, but yelling at people and that kind of thing. Not my thing.
No. Well, it's hard to interview out the drama. I don't know. Sometimes you never know until you get the people in there. But I mean, you can look for it. Yeah. But sometimes it comes from the interesting places. Sometimes the drama starts from people at the company that feel threatened, or newcomer comes in, fresh ideas, changing the way things go. Even at startups, startups reject some change, but it's. So, it's hard to breed out, but I'm in agreement with you. You got to keep it out because there's too much to do.
I just think the second it happens, it changes out. The second somebody like loses their shit, you're like, okay. For example, given what we do, social news, nobody's gonna die. Like nobody's on an operating table,
right?
Nobody like. Kid's not getting cancer. Like nothing's going. Like the worst thing that happens here, we can fix.
Yep.
There's things in your life that you should be upset about and angry about and fight over. None of them have to do with like, in my opinion, what we do. And it's just such a freaking waste of energy. It just seems ridiculous.
Well, my favorite thing at the office for people who've worked with me is don't just do something, stand there.
Yeah, right.
Which is just like, it's like there's going to be 10 crises in a day.
Yeah.
So just anticipate that's going to happen. Yeah. Stop what you're doing. Actually think about it for 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe actually get some facts.
Yeah.
and find out what actually happened. Before you do anything. And what I have actually learned, I don't know what this has to do with finding a job, but it's great work policy. What I've already found is that 9 times out of 10, you don't have a crisis.
No.
And the one time that you do, it's easily fixable with a couple of little things. It's very, very rare that you have this conflagration of apocalyptic, very, very rare that it's anything like that.
Not to go there, but it's narcissistic.
Yes.
Like if you think that what you're doing is that important,
yes.
And it may be, like if you're commanding 100 men men and women going into battle in Iraq, it is that important.
Right.
But if you're running a startup in Silicon Valley, you should succeed and work very hard at that. But there's nothing like the drama. To me, it's never going to take you anywhere.
This is a great anecdote on that. A friend of mine who just took a head of marketing position at a company, and he went to his first lunch break after starting at the company and being there for 2 months.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, within the half hour of him leaving to go to his first lunch ever, something crazy blew up because his associate, his coworker, who was in charge of the email and lead gen, sent out an email, a discount email that didn't just go to the people that they wanted to get the discount, but went to people like existing customers.
Right.
And like something happened with the list that changed when he left.
Yeah.
So he comes back from his first lunch in 3 months, and all hell has broken loose across the entire company because it affected existing customers, customers that sales was already closing, and then all the prospects who got the discount. And he's like, should I ever go to lunch again?
Probably not. You should probably avoid going to lunch.
It's hilarious. And by the way, it all worked. As much of a crisis it was, by the next morning it wasn't a crisis because if you think about emails, only 5% of the people open them anyway. So basically, of the 5% that open the email, 90% of those people were the targeted audience to begin with.
Yeah.
So it went away.
By the way, you ran a test. Nobody cares.
Right.
Like, welcome.
Yeah.
Speaking of narcissism, I get emails all the time from recruiters with ninjas and rock stars.
Oh.
I have a ninja this and a rock star that.
Yeah.
Like, well.
Oh, them. Yeah, they're repping. It's almost like they're the agent for the person. Yes.
Speaking of drama, like really, the guy's a ninja. A ninja, as I understand it, is a feudal Japanese mercenary. Now, like, which part of that am I supposed to be excited? Is he saying the guy's Japanese?
Right.
Which is kind of weird.
Right.
Or is he saying the guy's like wants to work at a feudal kind of society thing, or that he's a mercenary? Like, none of that's appeal. And rock stars, like, aren't rock stars like guys who work like, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 or 3 hours a day, 3 nights a week, do drugs and drink,
money
like,
for nothing, and your chicks are free, right?
Do I really want?
Right?
I don't think. So I don't want a ninja. I don't want a rock star.
Well, yeah. But the thing with the ninjas that you can at least count on is that they can sneak up behind you very quietly and not be noticed, which is actually good in an office.
I just want somebody who can like do the job and be pleasant to be around. We're not trying to,
Well, and there's something about this, I get the idea, this kind of reverse recruiting model, which is, I'm the talent agent for some really good people.
Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting thing about that model, which is I represent some really, really good people.
Yeah.
But those people shouldn't have trouble finding work on their own.
Yeah.
Why do you need an agent if you should be able to, if you're that good, you should be able to network yourself to the next position.
Yeah. Well, and I think So what they're trying to do is they're trying to take the Hollywood agent concept.
Yes.
The difference is in Hollywood, what your agent is doing is your agent is the guy who spends his time generally being aware of the projects that are available and that will kind of fit you. And I think the relationship you have with your agent is different from what the guys here are doing, which is basically trying to get you placed anywhere for 10% and move it. Like, in Hollywood, your agent knows you're going to be working on multiple projects at a time over multiple years. So they're not like, I'm going to jam you into like, this TV commercial. Right. Actually, with TV commercials, multiple projects a year, jam you into the TV commercial and move on. They're like, okay, does doing the Nexium commercial fit in with the fact that you want to do, a film that's going to pay you a certain amount? Does that fit in with your personal projects? These guys in Silicon Valley are just trying to, jam you into a job. Nice if it's a job that fits you, and take 10% or 15% or whatever it is. It's not analogous. There's a lot of things in Silicon Valley that are analogous to Hollywood. I don't think the agent component to the recruiters is one of them.
Well, look, in the recruiter business, and this is not all recruiters, because I know a lot of good recruiters and executive search folks, and they're genuine. But you've got a certain amount of them who, as much as they say that you're your best friend, and they call you when they need, hey, I'm looking for a this here, and do you know anybody? And you try to be polite and say like, hey, try this, and you give them the benefit of your network, but then when you need help, kind of like you get that radio silent. So you've got a good portion of that population which is very much focused on nailing down their commission, and it's what's in their best interest versus what's in the interest of the candidate, and again, you've got the good ones out there that are very candidate centric and actually do a nice job and talk it through and put you out there and represent you well. But that's a mixed bag, and I think the people who are doing the ninja rock star thing. Those are probably the worst of their group, because they're really looking, like you're saying, to fill that peg, that search, so they can get their paycheck.
Well, I certainly hope the guy doesn't think of himself as a ninja. That's all kinds of counseling. So summarizing the career advice, I think there's a couple of big pieces that not intuitive. One is understand how stacked against you the deck is. Like the odds of your working at Facebook is like 1 in 1,000 or some. The odds of you going to a company that's pre-venture capital, that's just a friend's idea, and the thought that you are better than venture capital, like you've figured it out, that your friend has that company, the odds of that working are incredibly low. And people go through that process. They go work at a couple of those companies. You learn something, we're running out of money, boom, you're out on the street. The quicker you can get through that process, either by just getting what I'm saying, or what we're saying, or by doing a couple companies that fail, like get through that process. Mm-hmm. I think a second. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I would add on to that the better way, to look for your next job. And again, I tell my students this all the time: is pick 20, maybe 30 companies that you think you might like to work at. Yeah. Based on you like the product. Yeah. You like the category. Like I'm into travel, so I want to do something in travel. Okay, what are 10 travel companies that are pretty cool in the Valley that might be interesting from startup to established? But pick those companies and start following them and understanding them and connecting with the people at those companies and doing those type of things, because you're going to have better success that way, because you'll understand where they are, in their life cycle, what they're doing, if it's a good fit. And the other thing that I tell people is go out there and find for your next job the job description, not the job description at that company. Find a job description that fits what you think you want to do next and is a good fit. It could be from anywhere. It could be generic, because what you're doing is that you're going to create a filter for yourself based on category, company, size, type of job that's going to help you find something that you really like, versus it's like, well, that's available, or here's my friend with a startup, or whatever it might be. Yeah. Because you should really kind of put the time in that you're going to enjoy and be constructive towards what you want to do as a person, versus this kind of random job search.
Well, and here's another thing too: is this is the trick with networking, like getting out and meeting as many people as you can. It's important not to get the job that you want, but it's because you don't know what job you want. So when you're a kid, or even when you're in college, you're like, okay, here's the world. There's astronauts, there's firemen, there's lawyers, Right? You go to college. Like how people go to law school because well, there's like lawyers and there's bankers.
Right.
Like that describes a very small part and doctors. You don't realize what's out there. So when I ended up at Friendster, I ended up there because I just met the guy who founded it, and he was working on a thing that no one had ever heard of. Like in a million years, you would have never looked at it, said, I want to work there. But the data behind it was working. And then you just end up in something interesting. And so there's for everything that you think you know, like, oh, I know what Snapchat is. There's 10 cool things that you've never heard of that are huge and important. And like you'll just meet a guy and he'll be like, oh, I was talking to a guy recently and he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not looking for like anything, but he was like, I need a CEO. I've got this thing and it does like $120 million a year in revenue and like 40 million. And it's like not this very interesting, but I just need like somebody who will do it. Like I'll pay him like a couple $1 million a year. Like that's not a job anybody's looking for, or I knew about or whatever, but there's a $2 million a year job that he's like, I just can't find anybody. And it's just from knowing somebody. It's not on a website. It's not a thing you would pick out that you like.
Well, a lot of these things aren't out there, but let's take that to kind of a slightly broader. Let's say you want to work in mobile, and you want to do something consumer facing in mobile, and so you've got an organization, let's say like Tandem, that does mobile accelerator and that kind of stuff, and they have their company night where they have 5 companies come out and they present their thing. It's like, those are the kind of things that, in other words, you can narrow it enough to be in the category, but still be broad enough. And you say like, oh, 5 companies presented tonight. 2 of them I like. I can go talk to those founders. And then you can kind of opt yourself into the kind of thing that you want to do. And it might not be as random as, let's say, what you did with Friendster. But if you don't get yourself out there and into these environments, it's never going to happen.
I would just posit that there's a chance that you don't know. That's the equivalent of like, I either want to be an astronaut or a pilot, but I like flying, so something to do with flying. And you don't realize that you can go work at a thing called Facebook,
right?
Which isn't even a thing, but that'll give you $100 million, and now you can go buy a plane. Like that there's just a lot of things out in the world that are not imagined in your philosophy, as as the man says. So,
well, I always say on the marketing side is like, if you ask customers what they want, they can only tell you based on what they know.
Yeah, well, no, of course.
So it's the same thing here, right?
Yeah, there's the what was the Ford joke was like, if you ask people what they wanted, it was like a faster horse.
Faster horse.
And no one ever asked for an integrated circuit, right? And yet they built them, and they turned out to be pretty important.
So I'll give you that on the job front. I mean, you can certainly wait for a little serendipity, but you can also apply some rigor to it too, from a category perspective. The thing is that if you want to go work at a company like GoPro, because you love that company and you love that product, there might not be a job there for you. But there might be a job in the GoPro universe, and so what is that universe? And then you have to expand yourself out, everything from, mounts and third-party things to content distribution and production and video. So there's things you can do, and you don't have to limit yourself to that kind of one thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, have we done this thing?
I think we've kicked jobs to death.
It's good.
Yeah.
Not the guy. We like the guy.
Yeah. Well, we love that. Yeah. But hey, not a better place in the world to look and find a job, but choose wisely.
Look, it's the capital city, right? Like anywhere on the planet, not to be speaking of narcissism, but in the world right now, one of the most interesting things that's going on is technology. It's all going on in Silicon Valley, all due respect to New York. And, being in the capital city, like there's a time when you wanted to be in Rome, like that was it. And this is kind of it. And I think it's a great place to work. It's a great place to be. And, kind of how you imagine your way through it, I think is an interesting topic.
Well, and to all you guys out there who are listening, gals, too, if you're out there looking for a job, just be positive, be yourself, and get out there. Yeah. Because if you don't, it's not going to happen. Yeah. You got to be the change.
Yeah.
So,
excellent. All right. Well, thanks for doing this.
This is fun.
All right. This has been the Something Venture podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. I'm your host. I will see you next time.